Hello again, my name is Jeff Farbman from the Wallace Center at Winrock International. Welcome to another National Good Food Network webinar. In this webinar, National Food Hub Survey 2015, you will get the most in-depth report on the state of the food hub in the US today. The Wallace Center coordinates the NGFN Food Hub Collaboration, and as such, we're often asked if food hubs are viable. How many there are out there? What are they doing? Are they having impacts on small farmer viability? And on and on. Michigan State University's Center for Regional Food Systems is here today to give you the best data we have. And to whet your appetite, it's quite amazing what's going on across the country. So let me introduce the Wallace Center and the NGFN. The Wallace Center, a business unit of Winrock International, is the host of the NGFN webinar series. The Wallace Center has been a leading organization in the movement for a more sustainable and equitable food system for over 25 years. In particular, we're focused on advancing regional, collaborative efforts around the country to move good food, healthy, green, fair, affordable food beyond the direct marketing realm into the larger scale wholesale channels. The National Good Food Network, or NGFN, is an initiative of the Wallace Center. We create national communities of practice around market-based issues, enabling peer-to-peer as well as peer-to-export communication to ensure efficient flow of information and innovation from boots-on-the-ground projects to the national level and back down to the grassroots level across the nation. The Wallace Center coordinates and supports the network. We work with growers to ensure that there's an abundant supply of good food to meet the high consumer demand, to collect and disseminate the best models, stories, methods, and outcomes, and to ensure that policymakers are informed about the wonderful successes our network and partners have had so that we can continue to increase support for regional healthy food. You can learn more at NGFN.org. And with a webinar focused on food hubs, I would be remiss in not mentioning the Food Hub Conference. Every second year, the National Good Food Network Food Hub Collaboration hosts a National Food Hub Conference. This year, or this coming year, 2016, will be in Atlanta, Georgia, March 30th through April 1st, with a day or two of pre-conference activities and trainings. With a primary focus on food hub operators, we hold a nuts and bolts conference to raise your food hub to the next level. Researchers, funders, support organizations, and community government workers have all raved about how the conference has improved the impact they have on food systems as well. So save the date. We'll be looking for you in Atlanta. So let me hand the virtual mic over to Dr. John Fiske, Director of the Wallace Center, for some introductory words. I'm going to do a little formal introduction to John, which I don't usually do. But John is really a recognized leader in sustainable food systems, as well as a trained agricultural scientist. Under Fiske's leadership, the Wallace Center has reemerged as a leader in sustainable and equitable food system development. Prior to working at Winrock, John was an independent consultant, providing food systems consulting to several organizations, including the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. John is a founding board member of the Food Roots Network, steward of the Buy Fresh, Buy Local brand, an active member of the Sustainable Agriculture Food Systems Funders Group, has served as a fellow in the Donella Meadows Leadership Program for Systems Thinking at the Sustainability Institute, and was also awarded a C.S. Mott Fellowship of Sustainable Agriculture at Michigan State University. John?
Hi, everybody. It's great to be with you. Jeff, thank you for that extended introduction. I don't get that very often, so I appreciate that. And it really is good to be here and to be part of this webinar that comes around only every 2 years. And with that, I just want to say how fortunate we are to be working closely with the Center for Regional Food Systems at Michigan State University, which has excellent research facilities and is providing leadership in the state of Michigan for regional food systems development. So we really appreciate that. Oops, I went a little too far. I just want to give a little bit of context before we get into the specifics that Jill's going to present, Jill and Rich, on food hubs. You know, food hubs sit within this growing opportunity for local and regional food systems. You know, it's gone from perhaps an interest or a trend to something that's securely established in the market, providing opportunities up and down the value chain. You know, since 2008, it's grown to $6.1 billion in value in 2012, according to USDA. According to A.T. Kearney, which is an industry researcher, it's continued to grow and into 2013 and into 14. up 33%, reaching an estimated $12 billion. And the growth is predicted to continue at least through 2018. So I think it's important to keep in mind that we're on an upward trajectory of expanding opportunity, but also expanding challenges. And that's a lot about what we're going to do today. This one might have got a little messed up in its formatting, but that's okay. It's still readable. In addition to this, sales going up and the opportunity going up, the market channels that we use have also started to mature, both direct marketing and intermediate markets. Farmers markets are up 180% over 2007 to 2014. All right, so that direct marketing piece. Food hubs in 2014 reached over 300. Again, a large percentage increase. And intermediate markets, for example, farm-to-school markets, are up extremely high as well over the time period. And I believe okay, next. So food hubs within that value chain, as I said, they continue to grow. We now are over 350 hubs nationwide. Jill will talk about some of the revenues that are generated in the hubs that took the survey. If we use that data and extrapolate out a bit, I think we can conservatively say that just about $500 million is flowing through food hubs on an annual basis, reaching into that both expanded direct marketing as well as the intermediate markets. And we expect it to grow. According to the survey, demand will continue to increase. So on the upward trajectory, we want to do what we can to keep the momentum going, to establish solid businesses that are social enterprises that are having the impacts that we're after. So how do we do that? So just a few thoughts to begin with, and then revisit some of this at the end of the webinar. We need to continue to build the case for regional food as economic and community development, having those economic benefits and opportunities for growers and for jobs, as well as community development around food access and democracy and participation in our systems. To do that, we need to continue to gather data on business and social impact performance. It's extremely important to have that data that contributes to the case. And then again, that's one of the reasons I appreciate our relationship with Michigan State. The National Food Hub Survey, the Food Hub Financial Benchmarking Study that we did with Farm Credit, these are just two examples and really the tip of the iceberg of this data gathering that needs to happen on a continual basis, because it's useful not just to operators as they increase the efficiency of their hubs, but it also informs investors and other writ large, not just for-profit investors, but philanthropy as well. We need to have the story and the numbers. And we need to begin to understand of how hubs, how we create food value chains and the role of hubs within them. We all know that food hubs are just one component of that piece. Although an important piece, they relate up and down the value chain. So with that, opening thoughts, let me introduce you to Rich Pirog, who's a good colleague and a good friend. Rich is the Senior Associate Director at the Center for Regional Food Systems at Michigan State. His work includes developing a statewide food hub network and providing oversight to the center, work groups, and communities of practice. Before he came to Michigan, he was the Associate Director and Program Leader for Marketing and Food Systems at the Leopold Center for Sustainable Agriculture in Iowa. At the Leopold Center, Rich directed the Value Chain Partnerships Project, an Iowa-based network of food and ag working groups that provides technical assistance to farmer-led food businesses. Rich's research and collaborations have been publicized and cited widely. His recent writings include on economic impact of local foods, food hubs, and good food value chains. So with that, Rich, take it away.
Okay, thank you, John. Wanted to just add back the thanks and gratitude for having the opportunity for the second time in a row for the Center for Regional Food Systems to be able to work with Wallace on the National Food Hub Survey. My role here is just to provide just a bit of context about our relationship in the process and introduce Jill, who has been doing the heavy lifting on the survey data gathering and analysis. So the center was created in 2012. It used to be the CS Mott Group for Sustainable Food Systems, was led and is still led by Dr. Mike Ham, but part of my role in coming here to MSU was to help create the Center for Regional Food Systems. Among the things we work in around food, including food access and health, food hubs, farm institution, and healthy food financing are some of those areas. And we had this great opportunity in 2012 to start the Michigan Food Hub Network shortly after Wallace started the national effort around food hubs and collaboration several years after they had developed the Good Food Network. And because of that relationship there and the long relationship we had with Wallace and John and I had, it made sense for us to explore the opportunity for the center to play a key role in the National Food Hub Survey. So this is our second time around. We learned a great deal the first time around in working with a number of other partners that I'm sure both Jill and John will and Jeff will lift up that have played a role in review to make this survey possible. And we're just, as I said, very excited to be part of this and to do it again. And what's especially exciting is we have a number of returning food hubs. So we have comparative data between the two survey years of 13 and 15, which are based on records from 2012 and 2014. So just a very brief mention. You know, we're very fortunate. You know, we talk about Wallace's work in good food, and Michigan has the Good Food Charter. The way we frame good food is the same as around food that is affordable, fair, green, and healthy. We have 6 statewide goals to reach by 2020 and 25 agenda priorities, a very ambitious goal. And in addition to our Food Hub network, in addition to Farm Institution and all this other work, this year the Michigan Good Food Fund was also launched. This is a public-private loan and business assistance fund. We have $30 million in loan dollars, as well as supporting business assistance to supply good food to underserved areas in Michigan. And what makes this fund very different from other healthy food financing initiatives across the country, including leading states like Pennsylvania and California, is that this fund is providing loans and business assistance across the supply chain. So production businesses, processing businesses, and distribution businesses like food hubs, in addition to food retail businesses. So I went a little fast there, and just one last thought I wanted to share that also we wanted to lift up here in Michigan, and Jeff and John asked me to just mention, is the fact that with all these goals that we have and networks, we also have a project around shared measurement to try to work across organizations to measure not only sales for food hubs and farmers markets and farms institutions, but other food access type metrics, so we can add work up across organizations, and as John talked about on the national level, here in Michigan, make that case for why there should be robust investments in regional food. And so across these 6 Good Food Charter goals, we're working very hard and diligently across organizations to build the capacity and to really collect good food access, health, and food, local and regional food sales data. With that, I want to turn things over, and I'm going to introduce, this is what you all been waiting for, the exciting information about the 2015 National Food Hub Survey. It's my pleasure to introduce Jill Hardy. Jill is a graduate student in our newly renewed Department of Community Sustainability at Michigan State University, where we do work in community food systems. Her research focuses on social enterprise as it relates to food hubs. In addition to her studies, Jill works as a grad research associate at the Center for Regional Food Systems at Michigan State University under Dr. Mike Tam. And she also is an outreach coordinator for the Michigan Department of Community Health. Prior to returning to graduate school, Jill has a few years of experience under her belt. In addition to her work, she worked for over a decade at the Institute for Public Policy and Social Research at Michigan State University, where she managed all aspects of survey development and survey data collection for various projects for nonprofit, government, and university clients. And previously, Jill studied marketing and consumer preference and published a work looking at studying horticulture. She has a BA in biology, and I want to, again, introduce Jill, and she will be leading us through a lot of the really exciting new numbers for the 2015 survey. Jill, it's all yours.
Thank you, Rich. I want to echo Rich and say thank you to the Wallace Center for allowing us this webinar platform to share this research. I think we have some exciting results to share with you today. Before we get started, I wanted to take a moment to express my gratitude to all those hubs who spent their valuable time contributing to this research by completing the survey. It's absolutely true that without you and your freely given time and energy, this report simply wouldn't be possible. Beyond informing those organizations that are helping food hubs, I hope the report findings will help you and your hubs individually as you think about and plan for your hub's continued success. My contact information is here, but I'll give it to you again at the end of this presentation. So I think it's useful to quickly review the methodology we used. As Rich mentioned, in 2013, the first National Food Hub Survey was conducted by the Center for Regional Food Systems at Michigan State University and the Wallace Center. The 2015 survey was the follow-up to the 2013 survey and really represents the first time we have longitudinal data about food hubs. The survey questions in 2015 were a combination of 2013 questions, some of which were modified based on results from the last survey, and new questions to help clarify 2013 topics or to address topics that we didn't cover in 2013, like food safety and networks. Topical sections of the survey include general characteristics of food hubs, mission and community, employees and volunteers, infrastructure and services, farm and producer suppliers, finances, local and regional aspects, food safety and challenges and opportunities. And while we won't have time to delve into all these sections today, we'll touch on a few important points from most of them. So a little bit about the sample. This is the dry stuff about how we did the survey. The sample was derived to include as many food hubs as possible. The sources used to compile the sample list were the 2013 responses, the USDA Food Hub Directory, the National Good Food Network database, and internet searches. And these activities resulted in a list of 547 email addresses. Now this doesn't represent 547 enterprises. We purposefully left in emails to different individuals at the same enterprise. And we felt like the more contacts an enterprise had, the more likely they were to participate. That said, the first response received from an individual representing a hub was used in the analysis. Duplicates in those organizations identified as non-hubs or hubs not doing business in 2014 were removed as ineligible and not used in response rate calculations. So 143 hubs out of the 434 eligible enterprises responded based on targeted emails. So that means the response rate was 33%. Like I noted for the entire sample, it's not appropriate to assume that all 434 enterprises we used in the calculation of response rates were all food hubs. We don't have information about them other than they were on at least one of the lists we used to create the sample. In addition to the responses received via targeted emails, individuals with ties to food hubs at universities and institutes distributed a generic survey link to groups they worked with. We received 8 additional responses in this way. In total, that means there was 151 completed and partial surveys that we used in the analysis. One point of clarification before we move on, and I think Rich mentioned it, to keep things consistent today, here and in the written report I'll refer to the 2013 survey and the 2015 survey. However, the survey conducted in spring of 2013 collected financial information for calendar year 2012, and the survey conducted this year in 2015 collected financial information for the calendar year 2014. So this chart shows the percentage of hubs who responded by census region for both 2013 and 15. And some differences between years may reflect growth in a region, but the growth percentage can't be separated from the percentage that's merely a result of the different number of hubs responding in 13 and 15. What's important here to note is there's nothing to indicate a certain region was hugely overrepresented in the data between both years. First, let's take a look at 3 characteristics of hubs that are often used to group hubs in similar categories, and then we'll take an overview look of hub employees and product categories. The next few slides are interesting in their own right, but we think, and in many cases, data supports, that there are 3 important ways to categorize food hubs. Food hubs within a particular category are more likely to share similar characteristics around finances and business practices. Legal structure is the first one of these 3. In 2015, a little over 1/3 of food hubs reported that they were nonprofits. Similarly, over a third reported that they were for-profit, about 1 in 5 were cooperatives, and the remaining 7% were either publicly owned or had some other structure. The legal profile of respondents in 13 was similar to those in 15. So before we move on to the second way to categorize food hubs, I think there's an important point to make about the data, and I want to use hub legal structure to make that. And I'm using legal structure as an example largely because we have it available in 4 different data sets collected at different points in time. So here's the point. Because we're uncertain of how many food hubs exist that meet the USDA definition and or self-identify as food hubs, we can't be certain we're creating a good picture of what food hubs look like across the U.S. That said, we have a really good reason to believe that we have a good picture. So the USDA maintains a voluntary list of food hubs, and as of November 2015, there were 156 food hubs listed. There are 2 previous quantitative nationwide food hub surveys in addition to the survey that are presented in this table. First, there's the 2011 survey that collected information on 45 hubs, and the predecessor to this survey, the 2013 National Food Hub Survey, that collected information on 125 hubs. And as we mentioned previously, in 2015, we collected data on 151 hubs. So the take-home message is when multiple sources of information agree, then we can be more confident that we're creating a good picture of the population, and the table above shows just that. Because we don't know how many food hubs there are exactly, we can't calculate a valid margin of error. But if we were able to calculate a margin of error for the 13 and the 15 surveys, it would be at least plus or minus 5%. So keeping that hypothetical margin of error in mind, for type of legal structure, all 3 surveys look really similar to each other, and they look somewhat similar to the USDA voluntary directory. And what this tells me is that we're beginning to zero in on a detailed picture, though far from static over time, of food hubs. So the bottom line here is we have confidence based on repeated measurements that the results we present today represent the current state of food hubs in the U.S. So business structure is the second way hubs can generally be categorized. Business structure was not asked in 2013, but it describes the customer type a food hub chooses to serve. There's growing opinion among experts that beyond legal structure, one other important structural decision that touches on many aspects of food hub's operation is the customer types a food hub chooses to serve. Hybrid food hubs servicing businesses, institutions, and consumer markets make up over half of the hubs survey. And so the last important way to characterize food hubs is based on the number of years they've been in business. In 2013, the number of years a food hub was in business was a predictor of several variables, perhaps most importantly and most intuitively gross revenue. That's also true in 2015, and you'll see more discussion of that and what that means in the full report. So let's take a closer look at years in business. It's pretty clear that the percent of hubs in each category is about the same in 2013 and 2015, but the one big thing to notice is that orange slice. Almost 1/3 of the hubs answering in 2015 were not included in 2013 report because they simply didn't exist yet. That represents a 31% growth in the number of hubs that were answering the survey in a 2-year period. We won't be able to provide analysis by legal structure, business structure, or the age of the hub for most of the topics in the webinar. However, in the report where it's relevant and possible, we've done that. In 2015, 128 hubs reported that they had 902 full-time, year-round non-management employees, 570 full-time, part-time, and seasonal management, 348 part-time, year-round employees, and 262 seasonal paid employees. So that makes up that 2,187. The total number of employees and responding hubs in 2015 increased 85% compared to 2013. This is explained because more food hubs answered the survey, but on average the number of employees per food hub declined. Perhaps more revealing is the comparison of the 40 hubs who answered the question in both 2013 and 2015. Same hub comparisons show an actual 50% increase in the average number of employees over 2013. Hubs that had more years in operation, warehouses, and as in 2013, larger total revenues are statistically more likely to employ a larger number of paid staff. Next, a few slides about products. The chart shows the number of product categories carried by hubs in 2015. Food hubs were asked about 11 different categories of products that their hub might carry. Almost 1/5 of food hubs specialized in only one category of product, and most often this one category was fresh produce. But a few hubs specialized in meat or poultry, processed produce, or grains, beans, and flour. The number of different product categories a food hub carried was not significantly correlated to their revenue, but it was moderately correlated to the number of enterprises from which the hub purchased and procured food, as you might expect. 92% of hubs carried fresh produce and herbs, while meat and poultry or eggs were carried by 62% of hubs. About half carried milk and other dairy products, grain, beans, and flour, processed produce, or other processed or value-added products. There was little change between 2013 and 2015 in the percent of food hubs that carried a particular product category. However, a few small differences are notable. 8% more hubs carried grain, beans, and flour, and at the same time 6% fewer hubs carried bread and baked goods. The percent of hubs carrying processed produce increased from 38% in 13 to 46% in 15. While not shown on this chart, processed produce accounted for a stable 9% of total hub sales in either year. During the same time period, the percent of hubs carrying fresh produce remained the same, while the percent of total sales from fresh produce, again not shown on this slide, but it dropped from 68% in 13 to 63% in 2015. So understanding the farms and processor suppliers that utilize hubs is important. However, without direct access to farms and processors to collect data, we relied on hubs to report on behalf of their suppliers. So there's a lot going on in this slide, but first let's focus on the bullet points. 79 hubs told us that collectively they worked with 6,255 suppliers. That's 80 suppliers on average for hubs. That mean is unchanged from 2013. Half of all hubs in 2015 worked with 36 or more suppliers. So let's take a look at the chart at the bottom. As with employees earlier in the presentation, it's useful to look at same hub comparison. 28 hubs reported on the number of suppliers they worked with in both 2013 and 2015, and these hubs experienced a 60% increase in the mean number of producers and suppliers they worked with. We also asked about producers and suppliers owned by minorities, and that's not shown here, but on average about 1 in 3 of a hub's producers and suppliers were owned or operated by women, and 1 in 5 by people of color. Here's a look at the different types of suppliers hubs work with. The total adds to more than 100% because hubs could select more than one type of supplier. 1/4 of hubs are maintaining or renting out their own farms, ranches, or enterprises and distributing the products produced there. Almost 1/3 are procuring product from other distributors, and 15% of hubs include non-food related items in their product mix. The report gives more detail on hub-owned farms, suppliers in business less than 10 years, and producer practices and certifications. But for the remainder of the farm section and farm and supplier section, we're going to focus on non-hub owned farms. So hubs were asked how many of their total producers and suppliers were farms and ranches. And hubs told us about 4,083 farms and ranches, and this accounted for 65% of their total suppliers. So the chart here shows a question where hubs were asked about how many of their total suppliers were small or mid-sized farms and ranches, and that was defined as having gross sales of less than $500,000 per year. 92% of hubs reported that most or all of their producers were farms with less than $500,000 in yearly sales. Over the life of their hub, 72% of hubs said the number of small and mid-sized farms from which their hub purchased product had increased. And for hubs in business at least 2 years, 70% said the number of small and mid-sized farms from which their hub purchased had increased in that time period, so since 2013. So let's get to finances. We'll first touch on several revenue streams and hub expenses, and then we'll take a close look at a measure of business viability called operating expense ratio. These figures show categories of total gross revenue. In 2015, 113 food hubs reported total gross revenues in excess of $370 million. So here's 2013 right next to it, and the percentage of hubs in each revenue category looks similar. Even with many fledgling food hubs entering the market, the pieces of the revenue pie appear relatively stable across years. And this stability can be interpreted as when new hubs enter the market with presumably lower revenues, older hubs aren't stagnating, but rather they're moving up to higher revenue pieces of the pie. In fact, here's the average years of operation for each revenue category. And as you can see, and as we pointed out earlier, the age of the hub is correlated to how much revenue it makes. So let's take a look at sales. In 2015, 107 hubs reported total gross sales in excess of $333 million. So one way to think about hub sales revenue across product categories is in terms of $1 in sales. And this graph breaks down $1 in sales across all food hubs by product categories. Over half of every dollar of hub sales revenue is generated by fresh produce. 23 cents comes from meat and dairy products, and all other categories combined account for 19 cents of each sales revenue dollar. The full report also has information on sales revenue by customer type. It's great news that 2/3 of hubs are covering at least 99% of operating expenses with product sales generated revenue, but non-sales revenue is very important for some hubs. The remaining 1/3 of hubs are using non-sales revenue to fill the gap between sales and expenses. So this makes non-sales revenue really critical for some hubs. This chart here shows only the hubs, that 1/3 of hubs with non-sales revenue. First, it shows the percent of hubs with a particular revenue source. Almost half of hubs with non-sales revenue have a foundation grant. 1/4 have federal government funds, 15% had state, and 13% had local government funding. Some of this revenue, such as membership fees, income from other programs, rental income, and commission, is generated by the hubs, while still other revenue comes from donations, both monetary and in kind. Of the 61 hubs reporting grant revenue, 1/4 reported that they had revenue from one grant source. 23% reported 2 sources, and 5% reported that they had revenue from all 3 sources, foundation, federal, and state government. Second, this chart also shows for the hubs that reported that revenue source, the number, that's the number that's in parentheses, what percentage of their total revenue came from that source in 2013 and 2015. And you can see that the percentage of hub revenue coming from state and local governments nearly doubled between 2013 and 2015. Federal funds rose 4% and foundation grants remained the same. The full report breaks down grants by legal type, and as expected, nonprofits receive more grants of all types than cooperatives or for-profit hubs. So what about expenses? The percent of expenses by expense category remained very similar for 2013 and 2015. On average, product purchases and payroll accounted for the bulk of hub expenses. No other individual expense category, which includes payments towards things like space, vehicles, and fuel, made up no more than 5% of a hub's total average. So we've talked about revenue and expenses. Let's put those two together. Business efficiency ratios can be useful to help measure the financial health of a business, and while they can't reflect the nuances of different value propositions of individual businesses, they can allow comparison of different businesses or business types. In this report, we explored operating expense ratio, abbreviated as OER, which from the equation above you can see indicates operating expenses as a function of gross revenue. So the graph shows that 1 in 4 hubs had an OER greater than 1, which means their expenses exceeded their revenue. Conversely, 3 out of 4 hubs were breaking even or better with an OER of less than 1. So let's take a closer look at an operating expense ratio in 2013 and 2015. The top table shows operating expense ratio for all hubs in 2013 and 2015. In 2015, the average operating expense ratio for all hubs was 0.8, and the median was 0.88. Recalling that a lower OER or a decrease in OER is financially favorable, in 2015, hubs reported an average OER 19% lower than in 2013 and a median 6% lower. I think more compelling is the bottom table. It shows operating expense ratios in 2013 and 2015 for the 28 hubs that completed both years of the survey and for which I was able to calculate an operating expense ratio for both years. Same hub comparisons had an average OER decrease of 13% between 2013 and 2015. So the question remains, what makes a food hub profitable? And we looked at a number of things. The number of years in operation, the number of product categories carried, the number of employees, warehouse square footage, the number of enterprises from which the hub was purchased or procured, the total revenue received from government or foundations, or whether or not a hub had updated business documents, at least in this analysis, aren't predictive of operating expense ratio. So the implication is that there's either some other yet to be investigated factor or factors that are associated with OER, and or that there is a general OER trend dependent on some mix of variables we collected, but that there's enough exceptions to the trend to reduce statistical significance, so we just can't tell. What can be said is that OER has improved since 2013. In the report, contains an analysis both of this and a more conservative estimate of OER, but in either case, hubs' operating expense ratios were less than 1 on average. In 2013, several questions addressed food safety, and in 2015, based on the impending Food Safety and Modernization Act, or FSMA, and the changes it will mean for food hubs and their suppliers, we've added a more in-depth section on food safety. Food hubs in the survey were in agreement that FSMA will affect their operations in some way. 98% of food hubs acknowledged that in light of the possible implications for their food hubs, it was somewhat or very important that their producers and suppliers comply with FSMA standards. It's not a typo, it's 98% again of hubs who acknowledged that FSMA was important expressed concern over their suppliers' ability to meet these new standards. So not only producers and suppliers will be affected by FSMA, food hubs too will have enhanced food safety requirements. 83% of food hubs stated concern about their own food hub's FSMA compliance ability. When asked about their overall top 5 food hub challenges, nearly a third, or 31% of hubs cited meeting GAP or other food safety requirements as a challenge. The number of hubs placing meeting GAP or other food safety requirements in their top 3 challenges doubled since 2013. So as hubs begin to think about implementing FSMA, they're placing requirements for food safety training, third-party and internal food safety monitoring on their producers and suppliers. 56% of hubs with their own incubator or farm place a requirement for food safety training on them. 25% of hubs require farms, and 23% require non-farm producers to have food safety training. We asked about several other kinds of certification programs, and those results are in the full report, but here we're going to focus on those around food safety. 14% of hubs required GAP, and 6% required Good Handling Practices certification. An additional 2/3 of hubs prefer GAP or prefer Good Food Handling Practices, or both. We asked hubs how they were helping their suppliers get ready for FSMA. 61% of hubs would help a farmer prepare a food safety plan. 43% will assist with or provide GAP certification, and over a third provide incentives for food safety compliant suppliers and/or dedicate staff to help suppliers with food safety issues. All of the hub mission statements collected in 2013 and 2015 reflect values around sourcing or distributing local or regional food. That's what places them squarely in the food hub category. But most food hubs' missions, both explicit in their mission statement and implicit in their shared vision, extend beyond the geography of sourcing and distributing food. We wanted to find out more about what other kinds of social missions and activities food hubs were adopting. The categories of social mission activities here are related to helping farmers disadvantaged by size or minority status gain access to markets, growing communities by ensuring fair wages or access to healthy food, animal welfare, and environmental concerns. Hubs were first asked how strongly these activities were related to their stated missions, and then shown in this chart, hubs were asked how strongly these activities were related to their day-to-day missions. In general, hubs were more likely to rank their day-to-day activities higher than their stated missions. One interpretation is that hubs are walking the walk. That is, they're doing what they said they would in their missions. And based on the hub's rankings, they're doing it better in practice than on paper. 9 out of 10 hubs are working to increase small farmers' access to markets. 2/3 of hubs worked to increase good environmental or animal welfare production practices, improve community health, and/or make sure that they paid their employees a fair wage. We ask about several community activities in which hubs may engage. I've labeled this slide non-revenue generating activities, and it shows the % of hubs that are engaged in each of these activities. Economists might call these negative externalities and would say that in terms of pure profit, there's not really a compelling business reason to be spending time and resources on them. Yet you can see that hubs are indeed very involved. And this provides additional evidence here that many hubs are working hard to be good triple bottom line businesses. So one of the new sets in questions in 2015 asked about hubs' business networks. Hubs were given a list of information sources, and they were asked to indicate the sources that were important to their hub and to rank those sources from the most to the least important. The chart shows the type of source, the % of hubs who used that source, and the average rank they assigned to it. The lower the rank was, the more important it was to the hub. So over half of hubs use their informal networks to gather information. However, 47% of hubs using formal networks, including communities of practice, such as the National Good Food Network, rank the usefulness of this type of structured network 40% higher than informal networks. And this finding highlights the utility of formal networks for food hubs to learn and exchange ideas. About 1/3 of food hubs are using federal, university, or nonprofit organization resources, and most often they rank them as secondary or tertiary sources of information. So finally, I'll talk about challenges and opportunities. We've shown the market for food hub products is growing, but growth doesn't come without challenges. One goal for both food hubs and those organizations helping hubs is to anticipate and react to challenges, prevent them from becoming roadblocks, and to find and seize on opportunities. Hubs were asked separately about current challenges and barriers to growth, and I know the distinction between challenges and barriers can be hazy, and indeed there was some answer overlap. But here I'm going to present the answers to the question about barriers to growth. So the orange boxes numbered 1 to 3 show the 2013 ranks. In 2013, increasing staff was identified as a barrier to growth by about half of hubs. This was followed by securing more product supply and increasing trucker delivery capacity. In 2015, securing more product supply was the barrier identified by the most hubs, followed by securing capital and increasing truck and delivery capacity. The answers about top challenges are similar to the top barriers. 1/5 of hubs identified balancing supply and demand, which certainly has a component of securing more product supply as their top challenge. 15% cited managing growth, and 15% access to capital is their largest challenge. We asked food hubs about the growth they expected in the next 2 years. 2/3 thought the demand for food hub products would grow a lot, and almost 1/3 thought demand would grow a little. No one thought that demand would shrink. With this growth, 83% of hubs also anticipated growing competition for new customers, and 71% expected competition for their existing customers. This finding suggests that even in a high-growth environment, food hubs will still need to make important strategic decisions about their customers. So this chart shows that the % of food hubs that identified a particular customer type as having a high potential for increased sales. The hubs recognized the most opportunities for sales growth with CSAs in restaurants, caterers, or bakeries. About 1/3 of hubs identified their own storefronts, online stores, and educational institutions as good growth opportunities. What we've presented today is some of the key findings from the survey, and I hope you found these findings useful. The full report will allow us to look at these overall findings in more detail and in many cases broken down by the key variables I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation: business structure, legal structure, age of hub, and revenue. I want to thank my co-authors and advisors, Rich Pirog and Mike Ham, my co-authors and reviewers, Jeff Farbman, John Fiske, Jim Barham, and Gary Matson. I want to thank Mike Ham for the financial support to conduct this survey, and I absolutely want to thank Michaela Fisher, who authored the 2013 Food Hub report. Her hard work and her advice now have made my job immeasurably easier. And finally, I again thank all the food hubs who took the time to complete this admittedly long and detailed survey. So the key findings and slides from the presentation will be available online shortly, and we expect the full report will be available by the end of the year. I'm going to turn my time back over to Jeff, I believe.
Thanks. Yeah, actually, I'm going to, John wanted to say a few words, but I want to pile on my thanks to the participating hubs as well. It's really a detailed survey, as you mentioned, Jill, and it's their hard work moving food and their hard work working on the survey that helps us to really promote the cause in general. So, John, some closing words.
Yeah, my pleasure. Let's see. There we go. Oops. Right. I wanted to. Jill did a really nice job, I think, of illustrating the relevance of the data to when we look across the field. But I wanted to pull out some of those results and talk a little bit about implications and the future as well. So, I mean, the survey shows us some positive trends, such as new hubs are emerging and many are growing in their revenue. They're growing in the products they sell, the supplier numbers are growing, more employees, and more partnerships. And the data also shows that this continues to be an opportunity for small farms, which I think is important to all of us, and mid-sized farms, but we're growing small farms. The hubs, according to the data, are becoming more financially sound, and they're demonstrating that food hubs are an important and viable model in that value chain I mentioned earlier. 3 out of 4 hubs are breaking even or better, right? And the hubs that took the earlier survey and took this survey are showing a more efficient operation through that ORE. So that's important that we're seeing progress in that way, because it's a very competitive and a low margin sector in many cases. And importantly, hubs are making a difference. I mean, that's why we're all doing this. It's not hubs for hubs' sake, it's hubs for impact that we're after. We're seeing an increase in access to healthy and fresh food. We're seeing hubs actively working to improve human health. We're seeing opportunities for women and for people of color. And we're seeing that hubs are driving the use of more sustainable production practice, making the interaction between agriculture and the environment a better one. Again, pointing out that hubs are the partner of small farmers. The 72% say they increase the number of small farms that are being supplied and the product from those small farms. So it's number and value. If we add it all up, we can estimate that hubs are interacting with about 24,000 farms. When you start adding up these numbers, you start to see the relevance across the country. Okay. But as Jill pointed out, there continue to be challenges and constraints. But one would expect that in any sector. Any business sector has challenges, has closures, has growth, and has difficulty with various aspects. So this is not unusual. I think what's important is to understand what those are, so that many of us as supporting organizations, as investors, as partners, can work to address them. So supply constraints. And supply constraints and responding to growth opportunities were both identified. These are both, in some ways, good problems to have, right? Because you're saying we have growth, but we have challenges. And they're really related to that size of the market that I pointed out to begin with, that the market's growing fast. The market in intermediate markets is expanding, which is much more complicated to get into institutions and host in retail and other places like that than it is to go to the farmer's market. So it's a more complicated and a heavier lift. And if we're looking for supply, it's going to take time to grow farms. You know, it's a more complicated issue in terms of access to land, access to capital, having the capacity. So there are just some inherent growth curves in this work. And I think it's important also when we think about growth to stabilize the hubs. Right? We want to have stable hubs. We don't want farmers to take a risk on hubs that are not stable. Right? So we want those farms and those suppliers to feel confident working in partnership with the hubs. And so stabilizing hubs in some ways is a function of volume, depending on your model, of course. In order to have the infrastructure you need to be able to hire the right people, to have the distribution and access to the distribution and the trucking, you got to have enough volume to pay for it in many ways. And just as important, in order to have to get capital for growth, you've got to have that volume in a good business case. And on top of that, you need to have the capacity and the skills. So we need to be working on all of those together to meet the opportunity. Food safety was identified as a growing challenge, and I think with FSMA coming out momentarily, it's here now. In a lot of ways, the food safety challenge has been, it's coming, and it feels like now that it's here. You know, there's opportunities. USDA has partnered with us on the development of Group Gap. And so Group Gap will be available as an option for hubs to help create that culture of food safety and to take on some of the onus of food safety, working hand in hand with hubs, with their farmers and suppliers across the country. That'll be available in the spring of 2016. You know, just as importantly is the role of sector-focused organizations. Extension is an important partner in this, but so are places like PASA in Pennsylvania and CAF in California and the North Carolina Farm Stewardship Association. You know, these are the organizations in the sector that champion for the small farmer, that champion for sustainable agriculture, and have strong relationships to help build capacity for food access. I wanted to talk a little bit about the flow of capital, which was identified as one of the top 3 challenges, and it goes back, as I said, to growth that needs to be had. In my mind, the flow of capital it's a two-sided coin. Right? On the one hand, the capital has to be there. It has to be looking at the sector. It has to have confidence in the sector. It has to see that the hub or the business has a business plan. You know, and on the other side is that hub needs to be a good investment. Right? So it needs to be, the capital needs to be interested, and the hub needs to be a good investment. And so I think that's where the rub is. You know, what is a good investment in this sector? And it's an innovative sector, and it's an emerging sector. And so what is a good investment means variability and risk. And I think that's the place where we need to work together to really develop this pipeline of investment-ready hubs. And that's going to take some time. Business support services are extremely important in developing that pipeline, but it's not enough. You know, we need better examples. We need more consistent support. We need models that show what are these stages we're going through. And at the same time, we need to work with our lenders and those that provide credit and guarantees to help them understand the sector, because there needs to be a more effective deployment of capital. And one way to think about this is that, you know, we talked about grant dollars, we talked about debt capital from lenders, we talked about equity investment from the folks that are starting those hubs, as well as community efforts. But there's others like the CDFIs that have access to social capital, and the farm credit system that has an interest in developing markets for small farmers. So what would it look like if these sectors work together to create a more effective deployment of capital so that they're managing risk in a coordinated way? Right now what we have is a lot of flow of capital or looking at capital in a disjointed or uncoordinated way. On top of that, if you coordinate that with all the federal resources, which there are many for this sector, I think we can create a much stronger effective deployment of capital. Part of that also, as I said earlier in the presentation, was around building the case and having that ongoing data. So much of the investment sector wants to know, what does it look like? What's the business case? What's the economic development impact? What's the social impact potential of these hubs and other businesses? And so we need to continue to do that. We need to make investments in it. And oops, let's go back one. And this issue of regional efforts. I mean, there's a lot of people looking nationally. There's a lot of people looking locally. You know, looking at it from a regional perspective, where you have regional economic development organizations at the state level, where they can coordinate and focus resources. Michigan has been a wonderful example of pulling together efforts of investment, pulling together efforts of philanthropy to build capacity, to channel capital, et cetera. And that can be done, it's being done in North Carolina and other states and other regions. Ohio, for example, is coming out with a regional capital fund that's available for economic development and community development. The other piece I think Jill pulled up a little bit was networking, capacity building. And so looking to ourselves as a sector to work together. And to that end, as Jeff mentioned, there's the National Food Hub Conference coming up in Atlanta at the end of March and early April. It's a nuts and bolts capacity building opportunity. So hopefully we'll see you there. Wanted to point out also University of Vermont has a food hub management program going into its second year. It's an extremely affordable, extremely well-informed and well-developed program that I encourage you to look into to build capacity for food hub operations, either for operators of food hubs or for others that want to do a better job of supporting food hubs as advocates. The Emerging and Early Food Hub Development Workshop that we've developed here at the Wallace Centers has been delivered 9 times across the country, and we're going to be continuing to do that and looking to evolve that. And just as important are the state networks, like I mentioned, in Michigan. So I think with that, we look at how to address some of the current challenges that we have and how we might move forward together, and what are some of the big things we need to do, such as capital, and what it's going to take really working outside of our comfort zone and with new partners. So I think with that, I'll turn it back over to Jeff to manage questions.
All right, thanks, John. Some of the questions that have been entered already, and please continue to ask your questions, are people interested in some different slices of data. Now, Jill, I know you haven't presented all the pieces that you've looked at, so I'm going to ask a couple of these. It's possible that you file these under interesting. We better go look. Let me. Aaron asked about if there was some correlation between not-for-profit hubs and non-revenue activities. Or asked a different way, are for-profit hubs also doing community education and farmer training, etc.?
I did look at that. I don't have those results right in front of me, but the answer is yes, at a good clip. It will be in the report.
Great.
The answer is yes. It is in the report.
Okay, good. Joshua was interested in the super low OER numbers. So below 0.25, for example. What is the nature? Is there a way to characterize the nature of those businesses?
No, I don't have that information. I would say that this is a self-report, and the OERs are only as good as the information that's given to us. That said, they may well have very low OERs, or it may have been incomplete information that we got. But we think that looking at both the mean and the median, they're hovering around the same place. So even if there are outliers on either end of the spectrum, the total picture overall kind of washes them out.
Okay. Sarah asks, is there any info on what percentage of produce value pays the farmer versus the percentage that covers operations costs of the food hub? she continues and says, are most small farmers selling to food hubs at wholesale pricing or somewhere a bit closer to retail?
We did not collect that information.
Okay. And Rich, were you saying something?
I was just asking if we had a perception of that from the hubs, but no, that wasn't.
We know how much the hubs spent on food,
Right.
but that's it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. And the Wallace Center NGFN Food Hub Collaboration also, in the form of Farm Credit, did a benchmarking study, and there is some data there about what percentage of the dollar, the sort of wholesale dollar, goes back to the farm. So I will direct you to there too. Aaron has a question about the correlation between the age of the hub and the amount of revenue. Maybe we can go back to that slide. Aaron says that the oldest and youngest hubs seem to have lower revenues. Is that a misread of the slide?
Let's go back to the slide. The oldest hubs tend to have the highest revenue. So we want the revenue slide. You're getting there. 2 more, I think. Yep. So there, you can see that 24 years is on top of 7 million or more. And the low end is your, where's my low end? The low end is 100,000 or less, and you can see that's 3. So if you follow the pie around from the 3 at 100,000, you'll be increasing the number of years as well as the number of revenue until you get to the 24 at 7 million. That would be awesome, but sorry, 7 million.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good.
Jeff, this is John, if I could jump in there. I think my sense is because we have different hub models, right? We have what might be called direct to consumer or hybrid or wholesale. I think your direct to consumer ones are going to have a ceiling in terms of the dollar amount that they're going to reach, and so that no matter how old they get, they're probably going to stay fairly stable. And in part, that's why I think we see this 10, 10, 9 around the bottom end there, is that there's just a there's an inherent size in which you can do direct marketing in your specific region, but those also happen to be, viable, financially viable markets. And we know from the last survey we did that that those expressed a strong operating efficiency, or the OER that we calculated. So I think that accounts for some of the age, so that the age thing is correlated, as Jill says, but I think there's a bit of a and but in there is what I'm trying to get at.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great point. AJ asks a provocative question. How important is it to educate the public about what food hubs are and what they do? Maybe Rich, maybe you want to take that?
I think I'll make a few comments about this, and I think Jill is just pointing out in barriers to growth that hubs noted consumer education wasn't in the top 3, but it was in the top 5 or 7, and that's important. And I'm sure John or Jeff will reinforce this, but we're just starting to see work like Becca Jablonski's work at Cornell and others to see the value that food hubs have as far as local and regional economic impact effects, and once we account for what we would call opportunity cost, when we start doing that kind of analysis, our hubs actually helping to see more dollars circulate in their local and regional economies because they're buying more from local input suppliers that maybe larger national chains are or distributors. And I think there's some exciting research to follow up in that area that will help, as John said at the beginning, and he said at the end also, is to make that compelling case. This data, this set of data, along with the benchmarking study and many of the other studies, we need to be able to take this and have those, I think, compelling sound bites that are based on good research to show that hubs are making that difference. And so I do think he's right. The person asking the question is right. We need to do a better job of taking this, and then our nonprofit partners visiting with their local county supervisors and state legislators and saying, hey, when you're investing in the state, look at these investments, because they are going to provide maybe some opportunities, just like some of the other investments the state could be making, whether it's tax credits or grant programs.
Great. That's great points. I've lost in this a list of great questions, but someone was asking about. Oh, here we go. Daniela was asking about if there are data on the geographies by state. And what I have up here now is the geographies by region. We have, as with any study, it's important to maintain the anonymity of participants, and so this is pretty much as far as we're willing to break it down for public consumption. Is that jive, Rich?
Bill and I concur.
Okay, good. Marguerite asks, does the data indicate where the efficiencies are occurring to get lower OER scores? And is there any story we can tell from the data that we asked for this survey?
I wanna say
Sales. Go ahead, Jill.
I want to say no. We know the expenses by category, and we know the sales by category, but we don't know how much people were paying for things by category. So, yeah.
Again, I would direct people to the Food Hub benchmarking study, which did try to break out expenses and talked a bit about efficiencies and where they might be. I mean, the answer really depends on the hub and how they're operating. I mean, every business is different. I think some of it has to do with if you think about sales per employee, and can you find ways to get more on the truck, for example, or to sell more to each customer and kind of reduce your miles and your fuel costs. I mean, those are general, I understand, but it's just doing more with less in some ways.
Great. Tamara Jones asks, are there model hub business plans? I would actually direct you to another study, and actually we did a webinar on it that Jim Matson did for rural development. It's the webinar was called the $1 Million Question, and there were a few hypothetical theoretical models that were sort of fleshed out to understand the points of break-even and hub viability. Interesting data there. And I also wanted to direct you to the questions box where I put a link to the benchmarking study page and study itself that we've been addressing. There are several more great questions, but we are already out of time. So I'm going to thank Rich and John, and especially Jill, and as I mentioned before, and Jill did too, the hubs who provided this data. It was not an easy lift. So thank you, but I think really a tremendous amount of information we've been able to gather, and future current and future processing will lead to more insights. I certainly heard some really exciting and enticing data, and some challenges that hubs are still facing, some actually due to the overwhelming success of the model and the meme that's resonated with consumers around the country that food is more than calories and nutrients. The values behind the food is the piece that feeds our soul. If I can get a little cheesy, this webinar is being recorded, and it'll be archived on our website at ngfn.org/webinars, along with the other webinars in this series. Feel free to send others you think would like to have heard this presentation, and take some professional development time yourself and dig through our excellent archives. We have them organized by topic in the left-hand navigation area, several about food hubs. We do offer our webinars the third Thursday of each month, starting at 3:30 p.m. Eastern, noon 30 Pacific. Our sign-up links are always at ngfn.org/webinars, but make sure you get on our mailing list. Our next webinar in December is about group gap, something that was mentioned as food safety is a major challenge, and we believe that group gap is one of a suite of possible solutions. A group gap is a collective means for farmers to achieve food safety certification. John mentioned the Wallace Center has been working for the past few years with USDA to develop this customer-focused, farmer-invested, rigorous system for food safety that we believe is more accessible to many farmers, especially small and diversified farmers. This webinar will focus more on the experiences that some of the first pilots have had in attaining group gap certification, and less on the very nitty-gritty. We have the nitty-gritty resources coming down the pike. So register automatically if you'd like in our post-webinar survey. And I just want to underscore again our conference in Atlanta, March 30th to April 1st, with a pre-conference day or two. This is really the only national conference with a laser-like focus on food hubs. So if food hubs are where your mind is at, you should bring your mind and your body to Atlanta at the end of March. You can find the NGFN on YouTube, Twitter, and our website is ngfn.org. And we are on Facebook, the Wallace Center, so come like us. Wallace Center at Winrock International is your search. If you haven't already, sign up for our email updates. There's a way to do that in the post-webinar survey. Contact us at any time. There's our email address, contact@ngfn.org. We'd like to thank you for your time today. And again, let me encourage you to fill out that survey. We offer these webinars free to you, but we need to let our funders know about the effectiveness of our work. So take a minute, and the benefit to you is you can automatically sign up for the next webinar. All right, this concludes the webinar. Thank you again for your time. Bye-bye.